And now on the line is Michael Ewing from the Environmental Pillar and Irish Environmental Network. Michael, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Darren.
Michael, I understand that you've retired from your full-time jobs as head of the Environmental Pillar and Irish Environmental Network. I hope you are enjoying your retirement, are you?
Good question. Well, look, I have retired, which means basically they stopped paying me, but I'm actually still doing quite a lot of work in a voluntary capacity. They've given me an honorary title of Development Officer. So my new email address, instead of being michael@ien.ie, is development@ien.ie. So I'm doing work mostly on local government, SDGs, and a number of other sort of factors in relation to the environment.
Okay. I want to talk in this interview particularly about biodiversity and the forestry sector in Ireland. Okay. Are you a supporter of the government's plan announced recently for there to be millions of new trees planted over the next 20 years?
That's an interesting question as well, because it's in a way a loaded question. The government's plan to plant trees. Planting trees is a good idea. Depends what kind of trees you plant and where you plant them. But the right tree in the right place is the answer to that. I mean, we definitely need to plant more trees. We need to find out ways of doing it in a way which is good for nature, though. What we have at the moment is about 11% of our land surface is covered in trees. Another 3 or 4% is covered in hedgerows. We have a wonderful hedgerow network in Ireland, which is gradually being attacked, but it's still the best there is in Europe. But the forestry sector is just really all about monocropping with cyclas spruce, and that is a real disaster area. And not only the monocropping, but they're also using what is called clear felling. So basically you grow a big area of trees for 30 years, and you cut them all down at the one time. Which means the whole area is uncovered rather, and consequently the wind, the rain gets in, the soil is washed away. The whole thing is disastrous. I mean, if handled properly, we have what's called continuous cover forestry, where you basically cut down a certain amount of the trees every year. So you have a continuous rolling forest there that never actually dies away. You've always got mature trees, semi-mature trees, and new trees. And so the light gets in, wildlife gets in, other species get in, the plants. It's a much more natural kind of system. A bit more like, tries to imitate nature more than this whole sort of industrial forestry mechanism that is there at the moment. So, yes, I'm in favour of planting trees. No, I'm not in favour of the current policy on forestry. It's a complete disaster.
I read an article recently by Mary Caldwell that was in the Guardian newspaper last year about forestry in Ireland, and I hope to interview Mary over the next few weeks. Do you agree with her argument that the forestry sector in Ireland is turning Ireland into an ecological dead zone?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, because actually in conifer forest you do get a large number of, for example, fungi, which you don't get necessarily in other forests. But having said that, in terms of the whole range of fauna and flora, plants and animals, a mixed wood forest is a much better idea, and one that's managed on a continuous cover basis, where you kind of harvest a certain percentage of the trees every year, but leave the others to stand. So you get light coming in, you get, as I said before, other plants coming in. So yes, essentially, growing cyclas spruce. The other issue here is actually to do with climate change. The reason the government's talking about planting trees is because of climate change, to try and capture carbon. But if you look at the current forestry that we have, the trees are being cut down faster than we're planting them. So what's happening is the forest sector is actually emitting carbon, not capturing carbon in Ireland at the moment. Because in the early years of growth, a tree actually gives out carbon more than it takes in. So only in later years does it start to store carbon, capture carbon. So trees need to be kept in the ground for a minimum of 30 to 40 years in order for them to actually have a carbon capture effect. This is not happening for a number of reasons, one of which is that the forest grants don't go beyond, I think, 20 to 25 years. So people then, if you're a pension fund who owns a lot of forestry and the price of timber goes up, what you do is cut down all the trees, because you're going to make money in the short term. The other thing about our coniferous forests are that they're not good quality trees because of the amount of water pours down here. They grow very fast, but they're not very good quality timber. So they're mainly for pulp, which is not necessarily a bad thing either, but it just and if you want good timber, you need to go good variety of trees. Start creating timber crafts in Ireland, making furniture, whatever else you can do with really good timber and really good craftspeople. We don't have that tradition in Ireland, unfortunately. We need to start creating that tradition. There's a wonderful furniture school in Letterfrack doing brilliant work with young people, training them up to be good craftspeople. But then when you look around, where is the timber to do the work with? We should put more timber into our buildings, but good quality timber, grown for that reason. Yeah.
And what kind of trees do you think they should be grown? And can you tell me a bit about the kind of breakdown you would ideally have on these plantations as regards long-term trees or permanent trees and trees that are getting cut down, like?
Well, I'm not 100% expert on forestry. I do have some general ideas about this. But clearly, what grows best in Ireland is the trees that have been here before we came along. So they're the native trees that belong to the island that were here all the time. But also, at the same time, there is a kind of an argument, which I'm not sure that I agree with it or not, that we need to be preparing for the change in climate, because some trees will not survive climate change, and some trees will, in terms of a rising temperature, maybe more storms and all this kind of stuff. So we need to let nature take a hand. I think there's a good argument for, in many places, just letting nature grow the wood itself. So you just allow nature to take over, and trees will emerge. You know, there's seeds and all over the place. You have no idea where the seeds are, but they're everywhere, and they will just emerge of their own free will. Now, if you want, obviously, to do commercial forestry for particular purpose, if you want to, for example, grow timber for furniture, you'll probably end up growing things that aren't native, like beech, which is a brilliant tree for timber, for furniture making. So as I say, I'm not an expert on this particular species, but what we need to know is that the trees are going to survive long enough for them to be of value in terms of carbon capture. They're going to have a purpose beyond the carbon capture side of it. So they're going to be, they'll be of some use in the long term. We need to keep trees a minimum of 40 years in the ground. We need to have forests created in such a way that they are actually not just a forest for an industry, which we have at the moment, but they're forests for people, so people can spend time there for psychological and other reasons, for health reasons, to actually spend time in woodlands. It's really good for you, particularly mixed woodlands. It's a very good place to recapture your kind of psyche. So there's a whole load of reasons why you want to grow mixed woodlands, and you want to let the light in to allow lots of different plants to grow. And what will follow the plants is more animals and general wildlife, insects and so on will return to the woodlands that aren't there at the moment.
Okay, I understand that there was a debate in the Dáil on Tuesday night on biodiversity and forestry. Can you tell me any more about this debate?
I can tell you a little bit about it. Basically, what happened was the Green Party produced a motion basically condemning the current forestry practice in Ireland, the forest industry, and trying to take back control of forestry in Ireland. At the moment, the forestry in Ireland is driven by industry solely. It's based on legislation. Well, for example, quality legislation goes way back into the middle history of the Irish state. It's out of date. We see industry. I mean, they're doing what they're told to do under the legislation, but what they've been told to do isn't appropriate anymore. They've done a good job of bringing us back from 1% to 11% of the land cover since the state was founded. But at the same time, they're not going to provide what we need in terms of biodiversity. Bringing biodiversity back. They're not going to provide what we need in terms of climate change, carbon capture, and all that sort of stuff. So, it's. I think I might have lost your question in the middle of all that. Sorry.
No, I was just talking about the Green Party motion and the Dáil on Tuesday.
That's what they were saying. There's the state needs the Dáil needs to take back control of what's happening on forestry. We need a long-term forestry plan which is based on carbon capture and increasing biodiversity and increasing livelihoods for people in those areas as an alternative to whatever else has been going on there. So where you have a situation where a lot of farmland is going to be left because there's nobody to inherit it. Maybe there's an option there to actually encourage people locally to take on the planting of trees to create work in the future for their children or for themselves later on, and doing coppicing, which is the old method of creating short rotation timber, so you have sort of 5 or 6 year cycles of timber growing, get good quality timber out of it. This is a method that can be widely used, and it requires very little input once you've planted the first set of trees, and it creates a great place for biodiversity because you have this rotation of cutting and growing again.
I'd love to see a lot more forests around the country and biodiversity. Forests that normal forests that people can walk around, and not just commercial forests,
That's anyway, for sure.
Okay, Michael, to come towards the end of the interview, you mentioned the SDGs at the start of the interview. I've done a lot of radio interviews on the SDGs going back a few years since before they came into operation. Do you want to just tell us a bit about kind of how you're getting on with the SDGs?
Sure. Well, the Irish government produced a national implementation plan in late 2017. It came kind of into being, I suppose, beginning of 2018. And since then, the government has been doing a number of things. It's hard to... basically, every department then appointed a person who's kind of the connecting person in that department, in the government department, for the SDGs. They also created a senior officials group, but there's no mechanism for finding out what they're doing. So the government also created what we call a stakeholder forum, which meets periodically 3 or 4 times a year. There's another one coming up on the 18th of this month in Dublin Castle. It's open to anybody. And you can find out more on the Department of Communications, Climate Action and the Environment website. But it's a far cry from being a mechanism for ensuring that the government actually is delivering on the promise of the SDGs. So there's an issue there about accountability and about openness in that respect. On the other hand, there's a great deal of work being done in terms of trying to create awareness of the SDGs, but awareness is not the only thing we need. We need actually action, and the same as we need action on climate. So it's a bit disappointing in that respect. I'd like to see government be more open about what they're doing. Having said that, again, Ireland is by far not the worst in this regard. A lot of countries have been spouting about the SDGs and doing absolutely nothing, indeed carrying on as normal, but just pretending they're doing stuff. So we aren't the worst, but we're not the best.